check. Okay, so we are continuing with chapter 21 of the Vedanta Treatise. The chapter is entitled That Thou Art. So we touched last week on the 4 aphorisms. So these are the 4 statements made each in one of the Upanishads, which in a sense embody the entire Vedanta philosophy. So the chapter of this title, That Thou Art, is the second of these aphorisms, and it states that you are the thing that you are asking about when you say, what is the reality? What is God? You are the reality, you are the truth. That was what we finished with last week, just going through those 4 aphorisms. The section we're up to now is entitled Your Original Being. So the implication here is that the original being has somehow shifted or modified or been conditioned out of its original state, and that we've lost an awareness of what that original state is, and so we need to be re-educated, if you like. So let's just continue with the text. He says, your real being is the supreme self, the state of absolute peace and bliss. All through your life, you experience a constant pressure for gaining pleasure, peace, happiness. The pursuit of happiness would not cease until you reach your absolute state. This is a natural phenomenon. Every object remains restless until restored to its original state. For example, a coiled spring contracted would exert pressure to return to its own length. Similarly, your desires continuously pressurize you since you have moved away from yourself, your original being. And to get yourself free from desires and gain absolute liberation, you must return to your original state, attain self-realization. So he gives the example of a coiled spring here. If you compress it, there's a pressure to return to its original length. If you pull it, same thing, there's a pressure to return to its original length. There's a similar phenomenon for the human personality. We are constantly pressurized to take ourselves somewhere. When we say take ourselves somewhere, I don't mean physically, obviously. It's to drive our experience towards an enhanced sense of well-being. From the smallest things, I want to go and get an ice cream from the store, through to larger things. I need a partner and a family. I want this kind of job. I want this kind of life. Everything we do is to experience an enhanced sense of, we've used the word well-being here, but ask yourself, what are you doing everything for? Take any action that you've chosen or course of action. Why did you do that? And you can give answers, A, B, C. Every time you answer, ask again, yes, but why did you do that? So what? For what? Keep on digging, keep on going down, down, down until you find that you'll end up for happiness or for peace or for well-being, whatever word you use. There's an experience that we're familiar with that we want to continue to recreate, more and more of it. And again, he's used the word here, peace. The question that we can start to really ask ourselves is, what is that state? What is it that I'm searching for? And where is its native home? Because I find it in a circumstance, I get my ice cream, I get my partner, I get my family. And that sense of peace that we got on contacting the object doesn't last. It dissipates, it changes. It gets crowded over by other things. And so we go looking for it in other ways. We're continuously functioning in the world to try and gain some sense of peace. What is it? Where is it? Where does it come from? So this pressure that we feel to move from experience to experience, he calls desire. while we are caught up in this cycle of desiring, acting, enjoying, desiring, acting, enjoying, we'll never find a true sense of peace. So he says that to get free from desires and gain absolute liberation, you need to return to your original state, attain self-realization. So it says that the native home of that sense of well-being that you've been craving continuously is within your own self. Mind entertaining unfulfilled desires will always remain agitated, frustrated, stressed out. Hence, religion has personified desire as the devil, obscuring the divinity in humans. Christianity has personified desire as Satan, Islam as Shaitan, Buddhism as Mara, Hinduism as Asura. A human being has to cross over the spiritual barrier, desire, to reach the original state of godhood. The scriptures have pronounced the self within as that ultimate state. I am that I am, Old Testament. The kingdom of God is within you, New Testament. The greatest jihad is that for the conquest of self, Quran. I am the self in all beings, Bhagavad Gita, and self is God, Upanishads. So look at the nature of desire. Whenever we are caught up in a desire, what's it like? Irrespective of what the desire is for, we experience a sense of lacking something, a sense of being separated from something that is meaningful and important. There's that sense of stress, there's that sense of disappointment, or whatever word you want to use, a sense of being separated from the thing of meaning. And there's a sense of agitation. I've got to get it, I've got to get it. If I don't get it, what will become of me? So there's mental agitation, that constant chatter. There's the fear of losing, there's the anxiety of being separated from the thing. So loss, separation, agitation, these are the experiences of desire. It's implicit in there. When we're caught up in desire, then this becomes our experience. So while we are chasing the object, we experience that. When we get the object, there's a temporary peace, and it can be associated with other desires like being afraid of losing the object and so forth. But it continues on, So removing desire then is the path and the goal of spirituality. And so, as he says here, desire has been personified as a barrier between a person and their inherent godhood, that unbridled sense of liberation or satisfaction. So part of the potential problem associated with this kind of idea is that we begin then to reject or suppress desire rather than maturing through it. So this is a phenomenon that we brought up in a few of the classes. We were touching on it with regards to the Ishavasya Upanishad, where he talks about those being lost in spiritual knowledge and spiritual practice, being lost in a deeper darkness than those who are pursuing the world. So what is spiritual bypassing? Spiritual bypassing is this phenomenon where we use a spiritual practice or we use a spiritual concept as a way of avoiding our obligation to deal with our own minds. There are elements of our personality, desire, and the associated emotions that arise from them, and the beliefs, the thought patterns that create the desire, that are difficult to deal with. The emotions are unpleasant. Confronting the beliefs that I have is unpleasant. Don't want to do it. So don't do it. Just avoid the desire altogether. So the avoidance of the desire when we should be dealing with our material nature is this bypassing. So it's a suppression of desire. And this is something that you'll see in spiritual life all over. People who are, with good intention, wrongly applying the knowledge so that they, in fact, become, if you like, less spiritual, which is to say that they become more caught up in their own ego and more desire-ridden, more controlled by desire, because the desires that they're suppressing or bypassing are continuing to exert their pressure. That's just a little caveat along the side, but the idea here remains the same, which is that it is through the transcendence of desire that we gain that sense of liberation. How do you transcend desire? Well, by occupying a higher level of knowledge. If you know, we use this example all the time, if you have two glasses of water, one is clear and one is cloudy, which one will you reach for? When you're thirsty, you'll reach for the clear one. For all the obvious reasons, we don't need to go into why that's the case. When you have found a truer, more meaningful sense of satisfaction, happiness, peace, will you go back to the old behaviors that you used to engage in that give you a lower quality, a diminished sense of satisfaction? Of course not. Not once you're established. So, once you have, if you like, been in contact with yourself, you'll see yourself as the native home of happiness. And then you'll recognize the things I was chasing do not bring me happiness. They bring a temporary fluctuation in the mind, and sometimes that is an enjoyable fluctuation, but true happiness is not found there, it's found here. And so once you've seen yourself, capital S, there's an immediate recognition that in these other places there is no true joy. The desire falls away effortlessly. So the effort that we put in to manage desire, to control desire, these are important. But the real effort in gaining satisfaction is less about controlling and wrestling with desire and more about inquiring into the truth of who and what you are. It takes faith, it takes courage, and it takes shraddha, that consistent application of our attention. It says your real self, your original being, is the seat of absolute peace and bliss. You've lost your divine status due to identification and involvement with your body, mind, and intellect. As a result, you are possessed with manifold desires. Your mission in life, therefore, lies in eradicating the desires and realizing your divine self. So identification with body, mind, and intellect. Identification means that there is a belief that you are. In the dream, you identify with your dream body. You look down and you see that you have come back from the war and you've got one leg and you're shorter and you're hairier. It's your body and you believe, I am this body. You wake up, the dream disappears, now you're in this body, and now you believe you are this body, a different one to the one you had in the dream. Identification with means the belief that I am. And so we also use this construction or this definition when we talk about love. Love is identification. Look to your partner. When you say, I love you, what does it mean? There's not two of us. There's one of us. We are a single unit. Your joys, your sorrows, your troubles are mine. At the same time, you retain your individual identity. You don't lose that. But you gain something larger. So this is what we're talking about again with through the Ishavasya Upanishad. That growth is not a discarding of so much as it is an embracing and including of. You lose nothing with growth except your false notions of who and what you are. Yeah, I am an individual, but I am also part of this larger. So you identify with body, mind, and intellect means that you believe yourself to be that, rather than the self that enlivens them. And the second word he uses here is involvement. One thing is to believe you are body, mind, and intellect. The other is to be looking through them as the equipments rather than looking at them. What do you mean by that? Objectivity is the opposite of involvement. If I'm not objective to my body, mind, and intellect, then I don't see myself as functioning through them. It's a good example. Again, go back to the dreamer example. While you are in the dream, you are a dream state. You are a dreamer. You're in the dream state. You are a dreamer. But you're looking through the dreamer personality or persona. It's only when you wake up that you can look at the previous dreaming persona. You are so involved in the dreaming persona that you don't see it. It's invisible to you, even though it's the vehicle that you're using to negotiate the dream world. You can be involved in your emotions. You're so furious at someone who's cut you off in traffic that you're not even aware enough to say, I am angry. But taken with it. And so, of course, the example that we continue to come back to when we talk about objectivity is, correct, watching a movie. You go through joy and sorrow and horror and fun and all of these things in the movie theatre, but you always remain objective. So while you're angry, you're still enjoying the film. While you're sad and heartbroken, still enjoying the film. You're not looking through those emotions anymore. You're looking at the phenomenon of enjoying the film. The reason that we are driven into actions is because we identify with and are involved in our desires. Identifying with the capital S self is to see those desires from back here. Objectivity. Any questions, on either related to that or to anything else before we continue on? Waker, dreamer, deep sleeper, and you. Conditioned by desires, the self has assumed three distinct personalities. There's waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper. All three are unaware of their conditioning. They believe all is well with them. Each finds no need to set right one's present status. Like the one under the influence of alcohol does not realize he has lost his own personality and assumed a false one. And he conducts himself as that alien person, believing he is fine. Likewise, having lost identity with the real self, you assume three false statuses as the waker, dreamer, or deep sleeper. In the waking state of consciousness, you assume the position of the waker experiencing the waking world. The waking world exists only for the waker and not for you. The entire waking world disappears when you leave the waking state and enter either the dream or deep sleep. Again, the dream state of consciousness, you assume the position of the dreamer experiencing the dream world. The dream world exists for the dreamer alone, not for you. The dream world also disappears no sooner you leave the dream state and enter either the deep sleep or waking. In the deep sleep state of consciousness, you assume the position of a deep sleeper experiencing nothing. The experience of nothingness is for the deep sleeper alone, not for you. The world of nothingness also disappears when you leave the deep sleep state and enter either of the other two states. Okay. So this is the material that we're familiar with from chapter 11, the states of consciousness. So he revisits it here in the light of this current section. So interesting subtitle here. Waker, dreamer, deep sleeper, and you. 4 entities. It's fairly easy to analyze our existence and to recognize 3 states of consciousness: waking, dream, and deep sleep. That's all we know ourselves as, either a waker in the waking state of consciousness, or a dreamer, or a deep sleeper. We don't know ourselves as anything other than that. And yet, when we start to analyze, and this is exactly why this section is included, not just for interesting discussion, but for careful, independent, solitary self-reflection. When you start to analyze this material and these ideas, then you'll clearly see, yeah, I go through waking, dream, and deep sleep. When you make that statement, there are 4 entities to you. Who goes through the states of consciousness? Who's the one traversing through them? You say, it's me. There's a sense in which there is a separate self going through these different states of consciousness. So the example that we've given is to analyze the distinction or the movement between waking and dream state. While you're in the dream, if someone were to ask you who's going through these experiences, you easily and simply answer, well, I am. It's me. Who's the one who went to that college, who has this job, who's performing these actions? It's me. There's a sense in which it's I am. When the dream ends, everything in the dream just vanishes. It collapses, it folds back into its source, which is the waker's mind. All the dreamer's family and friends and accomplishments disappear. So does the dreamer. The dream body I had with my one leg from the injury, being shorter, being hairier, that body gone. The emotional contours, the emotional profile of that dreamer gone. The thoughts and beliefs and the intentions and all the things that had meaning to the dreamer gone. And now there's a new set of all of these things here in the waking state. But when you talk about your dream, you say, well, I was a war veteran. Who was the war veteran? It wasn't the waker. The waker wasn't the war veteran, because the waker didn't exist. There was no waker. Who was the war veteran? Again, you point to that I. Who's the one who's never picked up a weapon in his life, who's sitting at the table, speaking to his partner about his dream? It's I. That sense of I am survives the transition from the dream state to the waking state. Nothing else does. What survives the transition between dream and waking? It's that consciousness that illuminates and makes you aware of your surroundings. It survives the transition. The waker and the dreamer are different. The I am, the stamp of reality that you bring to the world and to the personality that you're currently inhabiting, that stamp of reality survives the transition. The I am survives the transition. The space in which the perceptions, emotions, and thoughts arise and exist and dance around, that survives the transition. What is this thing? which is unaffected by the changing states of consciousness. Waker, dreamer, deep sleeper, and you. What is this thing which is the space in which they arrive? What is this thing which survives the transition, the destruction of worlds? You, that thou art. So he has this phrase here, all three are unaware of their conditioning. That's the state of involvement. To be conditioned and to not know it. To be conditioned and to know it is the beginning of objectivity. To be conditioned, to know it, and to try and move out of it, this is practice. And as we practice, that condition begins to fall away. And we'll start to live a life now that is more objective. The old thought patterns, the old beliefs, the old notions will still be clinging on in some way to some degree. They'll be exerting themselves still. Over time, they finally fall away. Your life revolves around these three states of consciousness. When you assume the personalities of the waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper. The waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper do not know you. All three are states of your conditioned consciousness. They have lost their original state of pure consciousness, lost you, and have become totally complacent in their own enclaves, each swearing by his own state. The waker believes entirely in his existence and the waking world he lives in. He rejects the other two states of the dream and deep sleep. So does the dreamer, swear by his own state. The dreamer also believes in himself alone in the dream world he lives in. He rejects the other two states. As far as the deep sleeper is concerned, he is steeped in a gulf of ignorance. He knows nothing, believes in nothing, experiences nothing. However, the waker alone has an edge over the dreamer and the deep sleeper. The dreamer and the deep sleeper cannot conceive, much less investigate you, the origin of the three states. Only the waker is privileged with a subtle intellect to conceive beyond his conditioned state of waking. Investigate you. Okay, so let's just pause there. So he says there's an edge that you have in the waking state of consciousness. If all three states are equally conditioned, then what hope is there for getting out of them? Well, they are all conditioned in the sense that the individual believes themselves to be the current body, mind, intellect. But there's a sense in which the waker has an edge. The intellect is fully mature in the waking state of consciousness. In the dream state of consciousness, our mind and intellect are fragmented. A lot of the circuits are not functioning. There's random ones are popping off here and there, and so you get this crazy, incoherent world. In the waking state of consciousness, the subtle intellect is fully formed, fully active. So we're able to conceive of something beyond the conditioned state. Now, conceiving of it doesn't mean that we're there. Being able to tease out this unchanging sense of I am from our experiences within the waking state, between the waking and dream state, dream sleep, between the waking and dream states, being able to recognize that sense of I am doesn't get us there. That's just the mind and intellect doing their work to conceive of something beyond. The I am that you can pull out of your experiences and that you can be aware of is not the self, but it points to the self. It gives an indication of the self. So this the waker can do. conceive of a thought of a thing beyond the three states of consciousness, which is the source of the three states of consciousness. I am conscious of all of this. How? How am I conscious of all of this? There's a plant sitting here on this table, not conscious of any of this. I am conscious of this. There's a rock sitting on the ground, unconscious of its existence and its surroundings, yet I am conscious. What is the source of that consciousness? Tattvamasi, says the Upanishad. That's the edge that we have, this capacity for positing and then investigating the deeper truth. So continue. He says, only the waker is privileged with the subtle intellect to conceive beyond his conditioned state of waking, investigate you. Thus, in the waking state, the waker can aspire to shed his conditioning and reach the unconditioned you, attain self-realization. However, a human needs to be spiritually evolved to raise the question as to who he is. The waker, dreamer, or deep sleeper. You seem to swear by each of the three while assuming that state. Then which one of them is really you? There is a parable in the scripture which throws light on this realm of ignorance, which every human being ought to investigate. So it says here, this idea of asking the question, who am I really, itself requires us to be in a to have a certain degree of spiritual insight. It's a recognition of our ignorance. So when we talk about spiritual insight, there's a tendency to think of, oh, I know something. The spiritual insight he's talking about is a recognition, I don't know. And we touched earlier on about one of the potential pitfalls of the spiritual life. And this is another one, is that we acquire a lot of information and we start to see things about ourselves and the world that we didn't see before and that maybe many others don't see. And we start to develop a sense of, I know. This level of spiritual development that he's talking about here is the insight of, I don't know. The true mark of a spiritual person is that humility of, I don't know. Again, it's a side issue. He says the parable here begins to explain what he's talking about. He says, King Janaka was an evolved person. One night, he dreamed a horrible dream. He dreamed he was a beggar in the street suffering from penury and starvation. He shot out of his bed. Even as he woke up to the king and the luxury of the palace, he could not shake away that vivid experience of the beggar. He wondered, how could he have been the beggar a while ago and now the king? Janaka summoned his ministers and posed the famous question ever asked by a human being, am I the king who imagined that I was a beggar, or am I the beggar now imagining myself to be the king? Who am I? The ministers were totally perplexed and could not answer the king. They lacked the spiritual acumen even to appreciate the magnitude of the question. Time passed, but the king would not be appeased. The indefatigable question persisted in his mind until a spiritually awakened sage, Ashtavakra, was brought in to answer the king. To that enlightened master, the king posed the same question as though the dream had just passed. Am I the king who imagined myself to be a beggar, or am I the beggar now imagining to be a king? The sage replied with his resounding words of wisdom, you are neither. You are not the king, you are not the beggar, you are the self. Now you are imagining to be the king. A while ago you imagined to be the beggar. Having lost your real state, you assumed the position of the waker in the waking state, the dreamer in the dream state, and the deep sleeper in the deep sleep state. The waker, dreamer, and deep sleeper are your conditioned states. Your unconditioned real state is the supreme self. not king, not beggar, not nothing. King Janaka reverentially received the message and found his real self. So it's a fascinating story and makes sense. When we are in the dream, we believe ourselves to be that person. And when we wake up out of it, we believe ourselves to be this person. What King Janaka was able to recollect was not the content of his dream so much, but that stamp of reality that he brought to the dream. That stamp of reality that he brought to the dreamer, the beggar. That sense of truly being that individual, he was able to capture alongside the stamp of reality that he was giving to this world and to this personality. And so he was, as you could imagine, in something of a turbulent mental state. If we don't know who we are, then we're mentally disturbed, we're agitated, we're upset. We need to find out, we need to know who we are, and we create personae around whatever we happen to be surrounded with to define that. So to even ask the question that King Janaka asked required a level of spiritual insight. Who am I? Of course, means I don't know who I am. And as he says, the resounding words of Sage Ashtavakra. You are not the king, you are not the beggar, you are not nothing. Interesting that he puts it in the negative. It's easier to state what you are not than it is to state what you are. And so we've already covered this section, negation and assertion. Negation is to distance yourself. First of all, conceptually, but then subjectively, from the conditioned bodies. I'm not this, I'm not this. It's in me, but I'm not it. There's a line in the Bhagavad Gita, the self, capital S, consciousness, capital C, is speaking, as it were. And he says, nature is in me, I am not in it. The word he uses is gunas, but he's talking about nature. He says, nature is in me, but I am not in nature. What's he saying then? Well, he says that nature, or the temperaments and qualities and so forth of this personality, they're in me. But I'm not in it means that I'm not involved in it. It doesn't enclose or encompass my identity. My identity is larger than all of nature. All of my thoughts, my beliefs, my desires, my proclivities, my tendencies, my temperament, my urges, my impulses, my thoughts, my possessions, my actions, all of this is nature. It exists in me. The entire waking personality, it exists in me. But it doesn't enclose me. It doesn't define me. The waker, the dreamer, the deep sleeper are in me. They arise in this space of consciousness. But they don't define who and what I am. This is the concept, this is the idea. How do we use it? That is the investigation, and that's sadhana. He says, it continues on, he says, so must you recognize your mission as a human being is to release yourself from the prison houses of the waking, dream, and deep sleep. Realize you are not the waker, dreamer, or deep sleeper. You are the immaculate self. Recognize your essential being, attain self-realization, spiritual enlightenment. You are heir to it. So he says it is your mission. And as we've touched on, then he's used this language. It's not a mission that is given to you. The word mission you think of as perhaps, your commanding officer presents to you your new mission. Your boss, the person to whom you report, your mission, should you choose to accept it. It's not like that. The mission is inherent in you. If you like, you're born with it. In the sense that by identifying with body, mind, and intellect, you naturally now will be driven to find your original being. And you can get a sense that this is your mission by looking directly at your experiences and your actions all through your life. Pick a day, pick a year, pick a decade. Every action that you've performed, every course of action that you've adopted, has been for what? It's been to gain a sense of peace, well-being, a cessation of the drive, a closing of the gap. An ending of that happiness gradient. So that's why it calls it your mission. Your mission is to find that unbridled sense of freedom. Everything we're doing shows us that. Whether we're aware of it or not, that's our mission. So he says it's to release yourself from the prison houses of waking, dream, and deep sleep. Absolute freedom. Got any questions on that section or anything else before we move on to the next? I am God. The entire humanity uses the pronoun I to indicate one's individual personality, to mean either the waker, dream, or deep sleeper, but never to mean the real self, Atman. Everyone is hypnotized to believe oneself to be a finite, limited being. In such a hypnotic state, it becomes extremely difficult to drive home the idea that you are not what you believe yourself to be, that you are the Supreme Self, that you are God. You reject the thought as absurd, something impossible. But the truth remains, you are God. You must realize the truth, discover yourself. Part of the problem here, of course, is all of the intellectual and emotional baggage that comes with the word God. We think of God as an individual being. Pray to God implies what? A set of ears that can hear it, mind and intellect that can receive it and interpret it, and then a will that can respond either with yes or no. It implies just a person, but a super person. So, you essentially, when we pray to God, we're praying to Superman. This is part of the problem, is that we see God as inherently separate from us and existing as a separate being. So the word God, as is used all throughout this text, means something quite different. It's the unconditioned consciousness that becomes conditioned as the waker, dreamer, or deep sleeper. It's the space in which the worlds of waking, dream, and deep sleep arise, exist, and into which they merge. It's the vitalizing force that enables action, perception, emotion, and thought. So this is the first aspect, is to subtleize the concept of God itself. The bigger problem, however, is to accept that I am that. We reject the thought as absurd. because our existence as the limited individual seems so real to us. Imagine someone trying to convince you while you're in your dream that you're not this dreamer. You're lying in a bed somewhere else, outside of all this. Impossible. And yet we experience it every day. It's something we do experience on a daily basis. I'm the dreamer, I'm the waker. Impossible for us to be convinced. So again, this idea then requires that humility to recognize I don't know who I am. If we don't have that, then all of the reading and reflection on this stuff is gaining information. We're able to talk about it, but it doesn't make any impact on our identity, it doesn't make any impact on our sense of well-being. In fact, it can have the opposite effect. As I touched on earlier, we can use the idea as a way of suppressing and bypassing elements of our personality that we need to integrate and interact with. So we need to do something with it, this idea, rather than just entertain it. So first thing, of course, is to understand exactly what it means. He says the affirmation, I am God, is not the same as affirming I am Indian, I am bachelor, I am tall, etc. These statements are fundamentally different from declaring yourself to be God. The words Indian, bachelor, tall qualify the subject. Indian is one thing and I is quite another. So are the qualifications. Bachelor and tall, distinct from I. They are properties, attributes belonging to I, but the affirmation I am God conveys something different. The word God does not qualify I. God is not a property, attribute describing I. The statement I am God is not the same as I am Indian. The statement means I and God are one. So we make all sorts of statements. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm hungry, I'm tall, I'm short, I'm Indian, I'm New Zealander, I'm all these things. We use these phrases all the time. When we say something like, I'm tall, the word tall qualifies the subject I. It's giving attributes of I. I'm intelligent, I'm smart, I'm funny. So he gives an analogy here of the rope and the snake. Another analogy that we can use to look at this is to look at, say, you go to a store and there's a ring made of gold, there's a bracelet, and there's a necklace. Imagine they could speak. They would say, I am ring, I am bracelet, I am necklace. And as far as it goes, that's true. Those words qualify or describe what the individual object is. But to say I am gold is something different. The bracelet can say I am gold, so too the ring, so too the necklace. So when the necklace says I am necklace, it's saying one thing. When the necklace says I am gold, it's saying quite another thing. Both are true, one is more true than the other. Because that necklace can be smelted down and turned into a ring. So I am necklace is relatively true, temporarily true. I am gold is eternally true. So too, I am tall, I am short, I am happy, I am sad, I am Indian, I am single, I am married, all of these things. I am a necklace. True as far as they go, but temporarily true, relatively true. I am God, something quite different. But he gives the analogy of the rope and the snake to help us understand this concept. He says, examine the analogy of the rope and snake. A boy mistakes the rope for a snake. He's caught up in an illusion. He states, the snake is 6 feet long, 4 inches thick, black in color. You declare the snake that he sees as just a rope. The statement of the boy is fundamentally different from yours. is fundamentally different from yours. The boy's statement that the snake is 6 feet 4 inches and black is similar to the statement, I am Indian, I am bachelor, I am tall. The length, breadth, and color are properties of the snake. But the word rope is not so. Rope is not a property of the snake. The rope is not separate from the snake. The snake is rope. They are one, the same. So too, when you declare I am God, it means I and God are one, the same. God is not an attribute, property. You are God. I am God, Brahman, the supreme reality. So the rope snake example we're familiar with from the chapter on the illusions. There's a rope in the garden. The boy walks past and mistakes it for a snake. To say that the snake is 6 feet long, 4 inches thick, and black in color is to talk about the attributes of the snake. To say that the snake is a rope is not to talk about the attributes of the snake. To say the snake is a rope is to fundamentally describe its real nature. I'm male, I'm female. We're talking about the snake. I am reality. I'm not talking about the snake now in the same way. What a hypnosis has overthrown the human mind. Every single individual in the world believes himself to be anything other than the reality. People consider themselves to be man or woman, good or bad, brilliant or dull, etc. None would even entertain the thought that one is God. And yet the stern reality remains that everyone is God. You are that eternal being, Brahman, not this assemblage of matter you have assumed yourself to be. Vedanta rules this truth, that you are God, bids you pronounce this audaciously. I am God, Aham Brahmasmi. But the people of the world are timid, hesitant to admit the truth. They dread the thought of losing their individuality and dismiss the very idea of the human as God. They would rather cling to the world and suffer. Strange but true. You denounce your intrinsic sovereignty and court slavery. Vedanta tirelessly appeals to your good sense to renounce your false life. Do not shy away from the truth of life. Hesitate no more. Get hold of the reality. Take charge of the kingdom within you. Be your sovereign self, the King of Kings, the Supreme Lord. You have then gained all that is to be gained in life. So you see, it's a hypnosis. Again, look at the dream waking distinction. In the dream state, you're hypnotized to believe you are that particular individual in that world. You wake up, you lose the hypnosis, so it seems. So it's not only that, but he says that there is a timidity. The idea of becoming God means that you have to stop being what you currently are, or so it seems. He says that people dread the thought of losing their individuality. Why? Because our individuality is all we've known ourselves to be. Okay, I can stop being this particular role in life. I can stop this particular character trait because I can conceive of a new role. 25 years I've been an engineer. I'm going to stop that. I'm going to go on to being a human resources consultant, completely different job. There's some trepidation going into the unknown, but at least I know there's something I'm going into. Even that kind of change can cause a sense of anxiety for us. Who am I now? I've been this person for so long. I know it. I'm familiar with it. Now I'm going into something else. Even that simple shift can be difficult for us. Give up the entire personality? Very difficult. They dread the thought of losing their individuality because we're not aware of the freedom that lies on the other side. We'd rather cling to the world and suffer. The devil you know, huh? So he says, pronounce this audaciously, I am God. So as we touched on in other times, it's not just an empty affirmation. So the idea of having an affirmation, something that we repeat to ourselves, can have some benefits, can have some positives, can certainly be unproductive, and can certainly be counterproductive. So when we are pronouncing to ourselves, we're not just repeating ideas. We are connecting with this deeper sense of not knowing who we are and the longing to know who and what we are. And then we combine that with the faith that we have in the words that we've read with regards to our true nature being an unconditioned, unconstrained, absolutely free self. Okay, so we'll pause there. Any questions or clarifications on anything that we've covered? Okay, so we'll pick up again from here next week. Tomorrow we're back 6 p.m. Monday Pacific time for Q&A. So if you have questions, you can join in, or you're free to send them through via email and I can take them up. For those joining, I'll catch you next time. For those not, have a great week.